Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The China Chapter. Dublin Detectives Link a Local Murder to International Crime, by David Pearson. Narrated by Roger Clark. Chapter 1. The fire engine turned out onto Annesley Bridge with its blue lights flashing and its sirens piercing the cool night air. It was only just over a kilometre to the address in Marino that they had been given by the neighbour who called it in, and the driver knew the area well. As they sped up through Fairview Strand and swung on to the Malahide Road, they could already see the smoke rising into the air. "Well, it's not a false alarm anyway by the looks of things," the driver said. "We'd better get another appliance out. It looks pretty bad," Senior firefighter Jim O'Donnell said as their engine got closer. He used his radio to call back to the station and summon the second fire engine. There were several people out on the footpath in front of the end of terrace house that was well ablaze. Flames were issuing from the upstairs windows, and smoke was billowing out from the roof space. Downstairs, the front door stood open, and flames could be seen inside. The 4 firemen that were manning the fire engine jumped out and set about their well-practiced routine. Hoses were quickly unrolled and attached to nearby hydrants in the footpath. Within seconds, 2 of the men had run up the path and were spraying water in through the front door, while another had put a ladder up against the house and was dousing the upstairs windows. Jim stayed on the path and asked a woman standing nearby in her dressing gown, "Is there anyone inside, love?" "God, I hope not. Tony Phelan lives there, but I don't know if he was at home tonight. He works shifts," the woman said, wringing her hands. "Okay, thanks." Jim called out to one of the men at the front of the property. "Barry," he shouted, "you need to get your BA on and go inside. There may be persons present." The young firefighter came back to the fire engine and Jim helped him into his breathing apparatus, checking the oxygen quantity in the tank that was now attached to the man's back. Barry set his timer and went towards the front door, spraying water ahead of him to clear a passage into the little dwelling. Inside the property, the front room on the right, the main reception room, was filled with smoke but wasn't yet alight. Barry opened the door gingerly, hoping to avoid a flame over where the rest of the fire would feed on the newly released oxygen and cause a firestorm. He was in luck. The firemen's attempts to extinguish the blaze were working, and the fire was already subsiding, although smoke and steam reduced visibility to almost nothing. There was no one in the room, so Barry continued down the narrow hallway towards the back of the house. The kitchen was hot and blackened where the fire had eaten away at anything combustible, but the flames had retreated under the constant flow of water from the men's hoses. Here and there small fires were still flickering, and Barry soon put them out. When he regained some visibility, he saw quite clearly the inert shape of a blackened body, lying on the kitchen floor in the fetal position. The person was quite obviously deceased. Barry had seen enough dead bodies to realize that life had passed from this individual some time ago. With some sadness, Barry made sure that the inferno was not about to flare up again, before checking that there was no one else in the property. He trudged upstairs, hitting his breathing apparatus off the narrow banisters, and looked in all the rooms. He found no one else, so he went back down and retreated to the safety of the front garden. Jim O'Donnell came up the path to meet him as he struggled to remove his smoke hood and oxygen supply. "Well, what's the story, Barry?" "There's a body inside on the kitchen floor, Jim. Definitely dead, I'm afraid. Probably a man by the looks of it, though it's hard to tell. The corpse is badly charred." Jim put his hand on Barry's arm. "Sorry, lad," he said. None of the crew ever really got used to the death that was caused by fire in these situations. As Jim re-emerged onto the footpath, about to call in the tragedy, the woman he had spoken to approached. "Can we go back in now, mister? I'm bloody freezing," she said. I'll just get one of the lads to go in first, to make sure there are no cracks in your walls or no fire that might have spread through the attic. But I think it should be okay. We got it in time," Jim said, signalling to one of the other firemen and gesturing towards the woman's house. "Any sign of Tony?" the woman asked. Jim just turned away and climbed back into the fire engine. He'd a lot to do. Detective Inspector Aidan Burke was at home when the call came through at 3:15 in the morning. He wasn't long in, and he was in a deep alcohol-induced sleep, so the phone rang several times before he realised what was happening and answered it sleepily. He had left Store Street Garda Station early enough and dropped into Edmondstown Golf Club for a drink on his way home, where he had met several of his friends who had just come in off the course. The group had worked up quite a thirst. There were 8 of them in all, and of course they were buying rounds of drinks, so Burke had to consume at least 8 drinks before he could get away. In fact, he had rather more than that, so much so that he needed to call a taxi to get back to his house, leaving his car at the club to be collected in the morning. Burke was no stranger to substantial quantities of alcohol, although he had been trying to cut back, as he realised it was affecting his work and his life in general quite badly. This evening was, therefore, somewhat of an exception. "Inspector, it's Sergeant Miller here. There's been a fire at a house out at Marino, just at the start of the Malahide Road. The senior firefighter is requesting a Garda presence. Seems there's a body in the house." Burke tried to focus on what the sergeant had said. "So, is foul play suspected?" "They don't know, sir. That's why they want you to attend." "Jesus, right. But listen, I don't have any transport here. You'd better send a car for me and get Moore out as well. No reason why I should be the only one to lose my beauty sleep." Sergeant Fiona Moore was Burke's number 2, his bagman, as it were. On the surface of it, they had a lumpy sort of relationship. Moore was from Portlaoise originally. Although she had been living and working in Dublin for some years, she could be feisty enough at times, but her personality was gentler than Burke's. Although it might not seem like it to the casual observer, the two had a lot of respect for each other, and there was no doubt that either one of them would have put their life on the line for the other, if the occasion demanded it. Burke crawled out of bed. "God, I feel like shit," he said to himself, moving a bit unsteadily towards the bathroom, and in that moment he promised himself that he would reduce his consumption of drink further. He brushed his teeth and ran a soapy cloth over his face. He decided he didn't have either the time or the inclination to shave, so he went back into the bedroom and got dressed. Then his phone rang again. "Hi, Aidan, it's Fiona. I'm on my way to pick you up. Miller said you don't have a car? What happened to it? Was it nicked?" she said, smiling to herself at the prospect. "Feck off, Moore." "No, it bloody wasn't. I'll tell you when I see you. How far away are you?" "About 10 minutes, give or take. See you then." "Great. I'll just have time for a cup of coffee," Burke said to himself. Chapter 2. Having collected Burke from his home in Crumlin, it took Moore just over 15 minutes to get to the site of the house fire. She pulled her car up well behind the fire appliances and other vehicles that were in attendance so as not to create a traffic jam. The firemen were packing up, rolling away their hoses, and putting the rest of their gear away methodically. The 2 detectives got out and walked over to where Jim O'Donnell was overseeing the departure. The house was still putting out some wispy smoke and steam, but there were no longer any flames to be seen. "Morning, Jim. What's the story here, then?" Burke said. He knew Jim from other similar encounters. "Morning, Aidan. It's a bit of an odd one, really. There's a dead man inside. We presume it's the occupant, a Tony Phelan, but we haven't identified him properly or anything, and there's more. There's evidence of accelerant. The glass in the back door was smashed, and we think petrol was used to start the fire. Want to have a look?" O'Donnell said. "No, I don't want to contaminate the scene any more than necessary. But couldn't the fire have broken the window?" No, I don't think so. If the fire did it, the glass would more likely be on the outside. It isn't, O'Donnell said. Right. Well, I'd better get forensics out then. Are you guys finished up? Yep, all done. I'll have the report written up later today. Do you want me to send you a copy? Yes, please. Thanks. See ya. Moore had been standing by, listening intently to the two men's conversation. When O'Donnell went off to join his crew, she approached Burke. "Shall I get the forensic squad, boss?" she said. "Yes, to full Monty. And could you get a few uniforms out, too? I want the road closed till we see what the hell this is all about. And when you've done that, see if you can find out what's at the back of this terrace. O'Donnell said there may have been a break-in at the rear of the property." Moore made the necessary arrangements and then went to see how best to reach the back of the house. There was a lane running down the side of Phelan's house, separating it from the next terrace of 6 similar houses, but it was full of smoke and debris from the fire, so she decided to go the long way round. She walked down the Malahide Road to Fairview and took the next turn to her right, which led her up behind the terrace of houses where Tony Phelan had lived. A short way along the road, where there were larger red brick houses, the properties were replaced by iron railings, and then a set of large gates leading into a school. The school buildings were to the front of the extensive plot, and behind them were playing fields. Moore entered the school and walked around behind the buildings onto the playing fields. She could see the blackened shell of Phelan's house at the back of the sports ground, and walked over to where the property had a boundary with the school, marked by a pebble-dashed concrete wall about 5 feet high. Moore didn't want to go in too close, in case there might be some trace evidence to be discovered in the grass, but she was able to determine that each of the terraced houses had a small garden at the back of their properties, running up to the school wall. It was hard to be sure in the darkness, but she thought she could see where the grass and weeds had been trampled down, adjacent to the back of the man's house. She set off again, retracing her steps to alert the forensic team to her discovery. By the time she got back to where Burke was standing impatiently in front of the burnt-out dwelling, the forensic team had arrived. Blue and white crime scene tape had been put up all around the place, and white-suited technicians could be seen inside the house bent over examining the scene. Moore brought Burke up to date on what she had found in the grounds of the school. Burke summoned the lead forensics officer and asked them to include the area behind the house and the lane to the side of it in their search for evidence. "Look," he said to Moore, "I feel like shit. I've had very little sleep and I need to go and collect my motor. Can you look after this for a while? You can call me if there's anything major, but I'd say they'll be faffing about for a while yet," he said, nodding to the interior of the house and the forensic team. "Yeah, okay. Will you be in later?" "Course. Thanks." He turned and went off to get a lift from one of the squad cars. When Burke had left, Moore walked over to the 4x4 belonging to the forensic team. She rooted around and found a paper suit and overshoes, as well as a pair of blue vinyl gloves. Once suited up, she made her way gingerly into Tony Phelan's house, walking across the plates that had been put down to protect the crime scene. Dr. O'Higgins looked up from his painstaking work as Moore approached. "What's the story, Doctor?" "This poor fella has had a rough time, Fiona. He's been shot through the heart, for starters. And as if that wasn't enough, he's been burnt as well." "Christ, shot? Any idea what with?" "I'll know more when we get the bullet out, but I'd say it was a handgun. Quite a small caliber, but I'm guessing now," the doctor said, standing up. "Anything else?" "Well, the fireman said that an accelerant had been used to start the fire, so we're taking swabs from underneath the back door. But it's petrol." "Any sign of a receptacle?" "No, but we haven't done the back garden yet. Oh, and I've sent someone round to the school in case there's anything there, but I doubt it." "Okay, thanks. How much longer will you be?" "A good while, but I'll get the body removed soon now. Then we can move around a bit more freely." "Okay. Thanks, Doc. I'll catch you later. Moore went back outside and noticed that the front door of the adjoining property was open and there were lights on inside. She knocked on the open door and said loudly, "Hello, is there someone there?" A moment later a woman in her 60s appeared, shuffling down along the hallway in a ragged dressing gown that she clutched tightly around her. Her thinning grey hair was dishevelled, and there was no trace of makeup anywhere to be seen. "Yes?" she said, peering out into the gloom. "Hello, I'm sorry to disturb you. Mrs. O'Brien, Elsie O'Brien, and you are?" "Sorry, I'm Detective Sergeant Fiona Moore. I was wondering if I could have a word about the fire." "Fair enough. You'd better come in, then," the woman said cheerlessly, and turned away to retreat back down the narrow corridor into the kitchen. As Moore followed her, she observed that the decor in the house was very dated and worn, with peeling paint on the door frames and black traffic marks on the old floral-patterned wallpaper. When they reached the kitchen, she saw two other women, much like Mrs. O'Brien, seated at the round table with mugs of tea and plates with the remains of homemade scones in front of them. Mrs. O'Brien made no attempt to introduce the policewoman, so Moore did the honours herself, sensing a little resentment about her presence in the tight little group. Moore approached the women cautiously. "Did you all know Mr. Phelan, ladies?" Elsie O'Brien answered on behalf of the group. "We did, surely. This is a good community here, Guard. We look after each other," she said to nods of approval from the others. "Does he have any family that you're aware of?" "He has a brother, but he's in America. Billy, I think his name is," Elsie said. "You wouldn't happen to have a number for him, I suppose?" Moore said. "Not at all, girl. But won't it be in amongst his things?" Elsie said. "I'm afraid there's not much left of his stuff. It's all gone up in flames. What did he work at? Your neighbour, I mean." "He works up at the airport. Something to do with the planes, I think," one of the other women piped up. "And he had no relatives here in Dublin that you know of?" "No," Elsie said emphatically, "and we would have known if he had." Moore had little doubt. "Have you seen any strangers around and about recently?" "No, we haven't, have we, girls?" Elsie said, and they all shook their heads in unison. "What started the fire, anyway? I don't think he was a smoker," one of the other women said. "We're still investigating it. We don't know till the forensic team have finished up." This was met with a stony silence from the entire group. "Right. Well, I'd better get going. Thanks for your help. I'll see myself out." Moore left the little house, thinking that the legendary Dublin welcome was wearing a bit thin in that particular household, but she supposed they had all had a bad shock. As she emerged, she saw Dr. O'Higgins getting ready to depart too. "All done, Doc?" she said. "Yes, Fiona. I'll be doing the PM at, say, 2 o'clock if you want to be there. The team are just finishing up in the back garden." As he was saying that, a shout came from the back of Phelan's house. "Over here! Weapon found! Stand clear!" An anonymous female officer, clad from head to toe in a white suit and with her head and face covered, was standing stock still looking down at the patchy grass. Moore hurried back through the house and out into the back garden. There, a forensic officer was standing with a small handgun, held at waist level, with a pen through the trigger guard. Moore took a plastic evidence bag out of her trouser pocket and held it open as the officer dropped it in. "Thanks. I'd better get this back to the lab straight away." Chapter 3. It was after 5 o'clock in the morning by the time Moore had finished up at the scene of the fire. She doubted she would get much sleep if she went back home. The events of the night would rattle around her head, keeping her awake, so instead she went straight into Store Street Garda Station where she was based. After she had made a strong coffee in the little kitchenette that they had set up at the back of the open plan, she started to get things organized. She opened a murder book on her computer and put all the details that they knew so far into it. Then she linked up to the driver's license system to see if she could find Tony Phelan so that she would be able to download a photograph of the man, but it seemed that he didn't have a driving license. She would have liked to access the social welfare system too, where there would be a record for the deceased and probably a photograph attached to his public service card, but social welfare had not yet provided a gateway into their computer systems for the police, so she would have to wait till later in the day and put in a formal request. Having drawn a blank, she decided to get a whiteboard set up. She wheeled it across to the back wall of the room and started to draw. She put Tony Phelan's name in a red circle at the centre of the board, and then drew lines reaching out from it in the classic spider diagram arrangement. She wrote airport, weapon, and fire at the end of 3 of the lines, and stood back to admire her handiwork. God, it's not much to go on, she said to herself. Moore busied herself doing nothing constructive, trying to process the events of the night, until the clock moved slowly around to 8 o'clock in the morning. Soon after the hour, her phone rang. "Moore," she said. "Hi, Fiona. It's Malcolm O'Higgins here. I just thought you'd like to know that we found a few more bits and pieces out at the house in Marino." "Oh, good. Anything of interest?" "Yes, well, the good news is that we found a kind of security pass for Phelan. You know, the kind that you wear around your neck. The bad news is that it's pretty badly scorched, but I can just about make out the name of the company that issued it. It's Jet 59, with the 59 written in numbers. That's about all I can make out, I'm afraid." Moore made a note on her jotter of the company name. "Did you find anything else of interest, Doc?" "We had a quick look at the gun. It's very strange. Most weapons like this we come across are 9mm, but this one is smaller, but not like the tiny ones you see in the movies that American women keep in their purses to shoot their husbands with." Moore laughed. "I must get one of those before I get married. So what can you say about the weapon?" "We need to do more work on it. I'll let you know later. Are you coming across for the PM?" "I'm not sure. One of us will be there. 2 o'clock, you said?" "Yep, that's it. See you later, then." When the call was finished, Moore turned again to her PC and started researching Jet 59. On the company's website there was a helpful brief history which explained where the somewhat odd name originated. In 1959, the first all-jet services from Ireland to the USA began with the introduction of the Boeing 707. But these were thirsty beasts, and the airport had to significantly enlarge its fueling capacity to meet the new demand. A couple of shrewd businessmen spotted the opportunity and set up Jet 59. As traffic grew in Dublin, their operation grew with it, and now they were the prime supplier of Jet A1 aviation fuel to a number of airline clients. In addition to a good share of the Ryanair business, they boasted several long-haul carriers on their client list, including China Skies, Mondo, and Fly Japan, all of which had regular long-haul flights out of Dublin with modern equipment like Boeing 777s and Airbus A330s. Moore had an idea. She left a note for Burke, who hadn't appeared yet, and headed out of the station. She drove back out to Marino and parked a few doors away from the burnt-out shell of Tony Phelan's house. She got out of the car and waited on the footpath, looking back down the Malahide Road towards Fairview Park. She didn't have long to wait. After a few minutes, a huge fuel tanker swung round by the traffic lights and started up towards her. Moore took out her warrant card and stepped into the road, holding it aloft so that the driver could see it. The man behind the wheel was distracted, looking at the burnt-out house, and kept coming. He only saw Moore at the last minute. Moore held her ground, and the truck came to a screeching halt, stopping just 3 meters in front of her. She walked to the side of the vehicle, and the driver rolled down his window. "Jesus, woman, are you trying to get yourself killed?" A car horn sounded loudly from behind the fuel tanker. "I need to speak to you. Pull over, please," she instructed, a little shakily. She hadn't realized how close she had actually come to being run down. The lorry hissed and wheezed as the driver moved it on to a bus-stop bay a little further up the road and pulled up. The angry motorist, who had nearly hit the back of the vehicle when it stopped abruptly, made a rude sign and blew his horn again as he passed them both. Moore opened the passenger side door of the cab and climbed up into the seat. "What's this all about? I have a full load on here, and I need to get to the airport or they'll dock my pay." "Okay, I won't keep you long. Which company are you hauling for?" Moore said. "Jet 59, of course. Why?" "Do you know a man called Tony Phelan?" "Tony, yes, I do. Why?" "Does he work with you?" "Well, he works up at the depot. We often give him a lift if we see him at the side of the road just about here, actually. He doesn't have a car," the man said. "What does he do up at the depot?" "I don't know. I'm just the delivery guy. What happens after that doesn't concern me." "But you must talk to him when you're giving him a lift, surely. What do you talk about?" "Dog racing, mostly. Tony loves the greyhounds. He goes to Shelburne Park whenever he gets the chance. Anyway, why all the questions?" "Just routine inquiries. Look, I'd better let you get on. Thanks." With that, Moore climbed down from the lorry back onto the footpath. She got into her car and headed back to the station. "Hi," Moore said to Aidan Burke when she entered his office. "You made it, then?" "What? Oh, yeah. And I got my car back, too. Sorry about that." "You're grand. What happened to you, anyway?" "You know. The usual. I fell amongst thieves, as it were, at the golf club. Never again, I swear." "Well, not till next time, anyway. Did you get my note?" "Yes. I'm just waiting for the phone company to get back to me with his phone records. We need to see if we can contact his brother in the States. Listen, can you do the PM? My stomach isn't up to it. And anyway, I need to brief the super." "Yeah, okay. I'd better get over there. You know how O'Higgins doesn't like to be kept waiting." "Right. See you later." When Moore had left, Burke slipped on his jacket and went across to Nesbitt's pub just across the road from the station. "Hi, Larry. Just get me a brandy and port, will you? My stomach is doing somersaults." Chapter 4. The charred, blackened body of Tony Phelan was already lying on the shiny aluminium gurney when Fiona Moore arrived at the mortuary. He had been placed on his back. Some of his face, which must have been against the floor during the fire, was still relatively unharmed. This gave him a very incongruous appearance. Dr. O'Higgins was there, dressed in his green waterproof apron and wearing a blue cloth hat over his luxurious mop of hair. Two eager assistants, one male and one female, stood close to him, waiting for his instructions. O'Higgins nodded to the female assistant, who approached the body with her colleague to remove the man's clothes. They started at his feet, gently taking off his shoes and then cutting away his socks. They continued with the corpse's trousers, underpants, and shirt, so that after a few minutes the man was naked. The young man covered his pelvic area with a muslin cloth to preserve whatever may have been left of Tony's dignity. The body was a peculiar mixture of textures. Where it had been exposed to the fire, the skin was blackened and blistered. Elsewhere, his skin was almost normal, if a bit blotchy. In some other areas, extensive burning with red blistering but no blackening was clearly evident. O'Higgins made a number of observations into the microphone that was suspended over the table as he walked around. After a few minutes, he nodded to the two assistants, and they moved in again to turn the body over onto its front. Tony's body looked to be in a similar condition from the back. The burning was less intense, but a blackened hole, about the size of a 5-cent piece, was evident, with yellow and purple bruising beginning to appear around the wound. "That's what killed him, Sergeant. And we're in luck. The bullet is still inside. I suppose you'd like to have it?" "Yes, please." O'Higgins moved in closer to the cadaver with long, pointed forceps and expertly felt around for the bullet. After a moment, he withdrew the implement. A small...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?